And so I guess it had to be built around, and Philadelphia was the capital during that time. Now, when it moved to Washington, now that I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that I'm not sure.
Ain't your history no way, so.
Yeah, but like there are areas, like where they sold slaves, and it's funny because I grew up in Philadelphia, and I had no idea about their slave history, and the place, because I heard a place that was called Head House Square, but never knew that was where, and as a matter of fact, it's a park there now. But that was the place where they used to go, and they used to sell slaves. And
so what took you to California?
Well, my husband is out here right now, and so I just came out here. Yeah, really, I just came out here for a visit. He's been out here trying to get some work done, and and then like an adopted son, he works out here in California also, and in the music business, and so he's doing some big stuff out here. So he works with Dr. Dre, and
okay.
So you have heard his music, because this guy he's just phenomenal. He has written for a lot of people, and like I said, now the Fast and Furious movie. I mean, every time the commercial was coming on last year when the movie was coming out, I would say cha-ching, because I know that dude was getting paid every time that came on. Because he wrote some of that. Yeah, because he was right. He wrote some of that. He wrote that the theme song, I think, that was to that movie, or something that was in that movie. Yeah, he wrote that. So yeah, he's done a lot of work. He's done work with Eminem. He's done work with. I can't even name all the artists that he's done.
It is the top of the hour. It's 7:00, and welcome to another edition of African Americans Ain't African, the talk show that proves without a shadow of a doubt that the so-called African American didn't find his way stuffed in the trunk of a ship. I'm your host, Buck Wylam, and tonight we're going to have two subjects tonight for the listeners. First off, we're going to have Renee Sanders talking about the Transatlantic Slave Trade and give us some clarity on the Transatlantic Slave Trade. In the second hour, we're going to have a guest talking about mental health in the black community. So the second hour is going to be just as great as the first. So please stay with us. As always, my host is Rick Moon. My co-host is Rick Moon. Rick, how you feeling today, brother?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Doing real well. And I'd just like to say hello to all the people out there listening tonight. And hopefully tonight we're going to have a good show. I'm sure we are. And it's good to have some females on the program for once. We haven't had very many on the show, so it's good to hear a female voice tonight.
Renee Sanders, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing well. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me on this show.
Oh, well, anytime we have people that have some information that could be nutritious mentally and psychologically to the community, we got to have them on, because what other way to change the direction of where we're going with information and knowledge. So I want to thank you for coming on for this next hour, and please give us all you got.
Oh, just and ask as much as you would like to ask.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I hope that I will be able to answer your question.
Well, one of the things in talking about the transatlantic slave trade, one of the things that from my understanding, and I like to use common sense and logic. I like to put myself in a position. I like to, try to figure things out and see if they work. And what I get from the transatlantic slave trade, because I have questions, I've always questioned everything that I was told, and some of the questions about the transatlantic slave trade to me just don't add up. and I've asked Afrocentrics, I've asked people who have studied the slave trade and swear that their grandparents came on the slave trade. I've asked Africans from the other side of the world who in their country wrote about this or what people they lost, and I always come up against a brick wall. So hopefully tonight you can help us with some of these questions.
I sure hope so.
Okay, so the transatlantic slave trade, tell us what you know about it.
Well, one thing that I know that most people don't even consider is that the numbers that we have been told. Now, most of the time, when you hear about the transatlantic slave trade, you hear about the 12 million slaves that were brought over from Africa into slavery in the Americas. However, that number is very deceptive because it is saying the Americas, and they're not necessarily talking about the United States. So when you do talk about the United States, you find out that only maybe 1/5 of that 12 million came to the United States directly from Africa. So in actuality, they had been working numbers on this, and they used to say 500,000 Africans came to the United States. That's all, just 500,000. However, that number now has been even lowered. It had been lowered to 450,000, then 400,000, and the last number that I saw was only 360,000 Africans that were brought to the shores of the United States. Now, we know that when slavery ended, that there were 4 million slaves in the United States. So now, if only 360 Africans were brought over here during the entire trade, and we're talking about from the 1600s until the 1800s, the numbers just don't add up.
Oh, no, I understand that the numbers don't add up. It's a whole bunch of stuff that don't add up, but we're going to get into that a little later. But one of the questions I want to ask you is this. One of the things I notice about the so-called African American is that the way we think, we still think kind of in slave mode. And this is what I mean by that. Let's say you're from Philadelphia, and I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. And me and some of my friends, now your grandmama, great-grandmama, great-great-grandmama, great-great-great-great-grandmama, and father from there, and you guys have built up a community there. Me and some of my homeboys come from Birmingham up to invade Philadelphia. What would happen to us?
Oh, well, you know what would happen. The people in Philadelphia aren't going to stand for that.
Right. So when we and this is the point that I'm getting where there's all kind of confusion. You say that maybe it was 400,000 Africans came over, maybe it was 150,000. We really don't know the actual numbers. But what we don't never think about is the people who were here. We talk as though if it was only 5 or 6 people here, like it was nobody here. Like the whole Americas from Alaska down to Chile was completely empty, and these people just walked in and set up whatever they brought with them and just obliterated all those people. Could you hit on that?
Oh boy. Well, we already know that the Americas were totally populated with people. And the thing is that the people who were really on the southeastern coast of the United States, or in the southeastern part of the United States, what is now the United States, were occupied by dark-skinned people. Most of the people who were writing during those years, they just said that the Americas were populated by a dark-skinned people. So when you realize that the people who were here were already of a dark complexion, then now, of course, it begins to make sense that it was easy for them to bring these other people over here, mix them together, because they're all the same color, you know. So you mix them all up together, and then that was their easy way to now turn the people who were here, the dark-skinned people who were already here. It was very, very easy now to call them something that they are not, because they have blended them up with the Africans, and now they're calling them Africans, and now today they call themselves African Americans. But the thing is that those dark-skinned people were already here, and they were the first slaves for 200 years here in the Americas.
Could you elaborate on that, please? Because that's something that many of us don't even know.
Oh, well, yes, of course. Now, and it started when Christopher Columbus came over. When he first came over, even on his first trip back, he captured people, and he paraded them through Spain, and so that he could show off the people who he so-called discovered. But again, he was showing them off so that he could let the people, the king and queen, know of Spain that, oh, here's a whole new crew of people that we can now enslave. He said on his first trip that with 50 men, that the whole island could be subjugated, and you could do whatever you want to with the people. So subsequent trips back to Spain, Columbus started taking back more and more. The second trip when he went back to Spain, he carried over 1,500 people back to Spain with him, and they ended up they ended up in the slave trade over in the Mediterranean. And as a matter of fact, it is even written that when they ended up in the slave trade in the Mediterranean, that they were labeled as Negroes. So again, it started with Columbus, and of course it continued on in the 1500s as they started settling on mainland United States. Many, again, during the 1500s, there were no Africans that were brought to the United States shores during the 1500s, and so they were using the indigenous people here, and they used the indigenous people from the 1500s up until the 1700s when they finally started bringing the African slaves over. But when slavery when it was given to be a lifetime sentence in the late 1600s, most of the people who were the slaves here were the Native Americans. So the Native American people, or the indigenous people here in the United States, were the people who were given this lifetime sentence of slavery. So then when they started introducing the Africans on into that, I mean, you already had the indigenous people there who were enslaved. You bring them on in, you bring them in. Now, of course, they're African males, because the females, they weren't shipping in as many numbers. So 66% of the slave trade was supposed to be males. So they were coming over here. They were having children with the Native American females, and really that's another reason why not that many slaves were brought into the United States, because the Native American females were able to hold and carry children to term. The African females couldn't do it, so that's why they had to keep bringing slaves in other countries, but they didn't do that in the United States, because the United States utilized their Native Americans and their indigenous people here as slaves, and they continued to use them during the entire slavery, and so again, that's where they got the Native Americans mixed up with the Africans, but most of the people who were enslaved were Native Americans.
Okay, so I lived in the Caribbean for 2 years. One time, it was an obscure island, and it wasn't nowhere near the brevity of Cuba or Jamaica. So what would make Christopher Columbus think that the island like Cuba or Puerto Rico or whatever island he supposedly went to, what made him think that only 50 men could subjugate those brothers down in the Caribbean?
Because the native people were very benevolent people. They were a very kind people. They, when visitors come, you offer your assistance, because that's the way that you were brought up to be. If someone needs food, you give some of your food, because that's what good people do. so they they were they were being the good neighborly people that they were supposed to be, because again, that was the way that they were brought up, to be kind to everybody. And so they thought that kindness was a weakness, and that's why they thought that they could do that, and they did it.
Okay, 256-849-2227, African Americans Ain't African Radio. We're on the line with Renee Sanders today, and she's talking about the transatlantic slave trade. I'm under the impression myself, because like I said earlier, I like to ask questions. And the questions I like to ask is simply, if these people thought that the world was flat, if they thought the world was flat up until 1492 or whatever that is, if they thought the world was flat, how could they put up an endeavor? How could they go into a business model where they're building ships, and I got some questions about that too. They're building ships in Europe, going down to the coast of Africa, kidnapping those people from down there, stopping at an island, Goree Island, which is another story that you're going to have to explain to me, because that makes no sense. Then going across the Atlantic with these people, 400 or 500 in a ship. Some things just don't add up to me. And it's like, to me, it's one of those like Santa Claus stories, or one of those biblical stories that they just say stuff, and being that we're trying to learn their language, or we're trying to learn their culture, we just pick it up and take it on to us because we don't know who we are. So it's some questions about the transatlantic slave trade that it just don't make no sense. Like, where were those ships? Here's a question. This is just a question. Because when you're talking to the African American about the transatlantic slave, we don't question anything. Most of us get our ideas from the transatlantic slave things from Roots. And that was a lie. So, where in Europe, you're in Los Angeles now. If I asked you, where do they ship all the goods in Los Angeles, you would tell me the docks of San Pedro, the docks of Long Beach, and Los Angeles. Where were these ships built? Number one. And the second question is, what forests were chopped down to build all these ships to go on such an endeavor?
Well, I will say this, and just also, I just want to just say also is that they knew that the world wasn't flat at that time. Okay, they already knew that. So, and I'm sure there's much documentation already that is about that, with maps and even like maps from the 1200s with Marco Polo or something, where they were even thinking that at that time even that the world was not flat, that it was round. They also knew, because African travelers had been traveling over to the Americas for ages. You know, one writer says it probably started in ancient times. We learned how to maneuver through the waters. Now, as far as ships being built, they had those capabilities. I mean, this was the 1400s. But they had been traveling on water for who knows how long. So during the 11th and 12th and 13th centuries, they were conducting their business in the Mediterranean Sea, and so you had to have the big boats, and they also had a slave trade during that time. But most of the slaves during those centuries, though, were white slaves, most of them from the Baltics, and again, that's where that terminology slave comes from. It comes from Slav, from the Slavic people who were the original slaves. So now they had the capabilities to build those boats. Now, exactly where they came from, now, I don't live over there, so I can't tell you that. But I do know that they did have the capabilities to make those kinds of boats. They were, like I said, they were selling slaves for centuries. They would go on to the northern Africa, but most of the time, like I said, they would go around Spain, around the Iberian Peninsula, past the islands, and going up into the Baltic region, and getting slaves from there. So for them to have the capabilities to ship slaves, they had been doing it for for centuries.
Right, but that's my point. See, I hear that all the time, but when I bring up the point that, well, during that time, most of Europe couldn't read. They were ran by kings and monarchs, and most of the people were serfs, slaves. So, if all this is true, how are you gonna build these ships? And I'm still wondering, where did you get the resources? What forests were chopped down? That question never gets answered. It's kind of like when they say they landed over here, they came over here and started in Virginia. The common sense approach to me was, well, what is Newfoundland? They came up through all those icebergs and stuff up through Canada. That seems like a more common sense approach to me, other than the stories that they tell us. And it seems that when they tell us stories, we don't question nothing. We just go whatever they say, and then we try to fit our lives around it. And I think that causes much confusion in the community.
Oh yeah, that I think does. But I think that just the point about what forests did they chop down to make the boats. I that right there I think is not as important as the things that did happen. And like I said, they found out that there were people and there were goods and there was gold and there were all sorts of things. They found that out once they started venturing down the African coast. Now, see, what we have to realize is that the Europeans, they were only dealing with northern Africa up until about 1440, so about 50 years before Columbus decided to come over this, that he found out that the Portugal, they started venturing down western coast of Africa, and once they got down to the western coast of Africa, they found that there was gold there. But again, this didn't start happening until the 1440s. And so they really didn't start with an African slave trade, which really took them into the Mediterranean, like I said, maybe 50 years before Columbus decided to come over here. But the thing is that when he started working for Portugal, and he started coming down the coast of Africa, and he would talk to the people that were there. And the people that were there, like I said, they had already been coming over here west for a very long time. They were the ones that informed Columbus that, look, there's people over there, they were probably trying to chase them away and say, look, stop getting our people. You can go over there and get those people. Maybe, I don't know. But all I know is that he did find out from those African traders that there were people on the other side of the ocean, and that's what made him decide to make the trip. Now, he didn't have the money to make the trip, so he had to go out and get the money. So when about financing, that's how he did it. He went out just like anybody else today. If you had a project that you wanted to get, you go around the people and you get your money. It just so happened that the king and queen of Spain, after they had just finished their war with the Moors, they finally decided, okay, you know what, now we have money that we can free up, that we can loan you and let you have so that you can make this trip. So they were the ones that financed the trip, the king and queen of Spain. And again, remember, they wanted to come here so that they can find another source of people that they can make slaves, because they knew that they were going to run into dark-skinned people because, again, they already found that out from the African traders that Columbus was dealing with when he started working for Portugal coming down the coast of Africa.
Okay, are there any stories, are there any authors, or are there any movies from Africa authors, from African directors, African playwrights, or anything giving their accounts of this so-called transatlantic slave trade?
That I cannot answer.
Because, it seems like, to me, just to me, it seems like if I came to your home to rip your children off, to destroy you, somebody in your community, in your house or whatever, would have written about it. And this is what I'm saying. They give us stories. And one thing about the so-called African American, Whatever they tell us to do, whatever they say, we go with it. We don't debate it. We don't argue it. We don't go, boss, that don't sound right. We just go along with it and we shape our lives around it. And so I've asked Africans. They say that's a damn lie. They didn't come over and steal nothing from nobody. Now, that's from some people over there. I've had so-called African Americans pull me to Africans and say, tell them we came from over there. And they like, no. So my thing is this, being that we speak English, being that's all we know is what they've told us, being that we don't have nothing to check it because we damn sure don't think about it, or we damn sure don't go, nah, that don't sound right. How is that affected? How is this slave trade story affected the people who has already been here all along?
Well, it has devastated the people.
How?
How? Well, especially for the dark-skinned ones, that they're totally devastated now because they don't even know who they are. And again, because they have been told that they are something else, and again, you tell somebody something for long enough, they begin to believe it. And so that is what has happened to black people here in the United States, is that they have been told for so long, you're African, you're African, you're African, you're African, that eventually, they have come to believe it. And that they have come to believe it, they have learned to accept it. When I was growing up, nobody wanted to be African, and everyone talked about the Native American ancestry that they had, because everybody knew they had some Native American ancestry. Nobody wanted to be an African, but now people have learned to accept it. And again, that's something that it's a learned response. They have learned to accept it. You're right, people don't ask questions. And not only do you have to ask questions, you have to be willing to go out and search for those answers. People have gotten very lazy, where they don't want to do the searching anymore. They could just sit back and be complacent. And when you are being complacent, you don't have to accept any responsibility, because once you become knowledgeable of something, it then becomes your responsibility to let other people know. And we have become a very lazy people as far as that is concerned. So, it's difficult. It's difficult to get people to really to comprehend something other than what they have been taught for such a long time.
And here's another thing about it too, and this is my favorite. You've seen the picture of the slave ship where all the people stacked in like sardines.
Oh, yeah.
The one that's shown it's the major picture shown.
Right.
One night I just counted the people that you could see. I mean, the way the drawing was, they may have a pole and they may have a person laying down wrapped around the pole, just to show you how stuffed in these people were. Mm-hmm. And so I counted the people on there, and there was 444 people on the ship. And I'm like, this is interesting. What would it take to feed those people? You got 450 people. What would it take to feed those people? And if you're in the middle of the ocean, if you're in the bottom of the bowels of a ship, you have to be thirsty. You're on the sea, which is nothing but salt. You're dehydrated as heck. What do these people have to drink? Plenty of water. Where would they keep that water on deck if space was at a premium? What did these people eat? And after these people ate and they defecated and peed and they're in the bottom of a ship, explain that. Explain how people are living into that, and how are people surviving that, being that feces is toxic.
Okay, now the thing is this, is that what they show us are the things that may have happened maybe once, so maybe there was one boat that was like that, because most of your ships did not bring over that many people. Most of the ships maybe brought over 90 people, maybe 100 or something like that, but most of your ships did not carry that large number of people. But again, they show us that so that we get our blood raging over images like that, and to keep us angry as a people, because then if you're angry as a people, then they can contain you still,
Yes.
But also, if they did have those conditions, those were only the sleeping conditions. Because like you're saying, there is no way that anybody can travel for months like that. There's no way possible. There's no way possible. So again, the people, they were able to get up. They were able to walk around. They were able to get on the boat. Because remember, now, this is precious cargo. They're going to make money off of these people. So why are they going to mistreat them when they want to get as much money as they can? Because that's their business. That's what they're in the business of, making money. How are they going to make money if their cargo dies? So again, like you're saying, people don't really think about the images that they see and then do some more investigating to see if that's what it was the entire time. Was that every trip? Was that just one trip, or was it just two trips, or how many slaves were on each trip? And again, you have to do some investigating, but like I said, people they're lazy. They're not concerned about their history anymore, or they don't think that it's important anymore to know these facts.
Yeah, and another question I had, and I was talking to a sister from Brazil, because she says down in Brazil now, they're trying to Africanize them in Brazil now. They're trying to put that African label on them. And the thing, and of course, going back to the story, Brazil and Africa, and anything that's along those longitudinal lines down there, all those people around the world that are on the same longitudinal lines as Africa or Australia or places in Indonesia, Melanesia, Asia, all of India, all these people look alike. So to me, there's just no proof other than them writing in books that this happened. And to me, the slave story, this is just my humble opinion, to me that African slave story is just to decimate the people on the lands that they say they bought these people over, to let these people know that no, you are not indigenous to this land. We bought you over here. You belong to us. You are our pets. Because that's definitely what an African American acts like, somebody else's pet. And you're from somewhere else. Don't worry about the land over here. We got that. So that's what I'm getting from it.
Yeah, well, I say that is correct. That is what happened. The thing is this, though, is that melanated people are melanated people. It doesn't matter which side of the ocean that you're on. If you're melanated, you have a dark complexion. You have a dark complexion, and so really, and again, they were mixing the indigenous people from one land, to an indigenous people from another land, but we're all indigenous. So, what did they really do? The thing that they did, though, is again, you mix these two dark-skinned people, still they're dark-skinned people, they're, like I said, they are two dark-skinned cultures that joined together. I'm sure that happened before Columbus, because again, they were doing business over here for many years. There was a trade that was going on. You could see trade items that were on the African coast that came from the Native Americans, and vice versa.
Really?
They found those things. Oh yes.
What?
They had found boats. They had found canoes over in Africa that belonged to Native Americans. Look, there was a lot of travel that was going on during that time. the people were not stupid.
No, I'm sure they wasn't stupid, but I've seen the Atlantic Ocean, and it ain't.
Well, see, you know what? When it's now, see, you have to think about that. These things were learned in very ancient times.
Check.
So you learned the waterways during ancient times.
Check.
And you pass that history on, and you pass that knowledge on to your children. So for centuries, you learn how to travel the waterways. Now, again, the continents are constantly moving, and so they have been moving apart. But and especially during the Ice Age, and where coastlines were much closer. So I'm sure that they learned then how to travel in those waterways and the currents. And really, it doesn't. If you pick up those currents that are out there, and you can travel very quickly from Africa and over to the Americas. And again, the currents is not the longitudinal. I'm saying that word wrong, but it's not those lines that are important. It's those currents and where you can end up with those currents. So if you look at a map that shows the Atlantic currents, you will see that some of those currents will take you into South America, and some of those currents are going to take you up into the United States.
But I understand that. But why isn't that done today?
I'm sure they still use those currents today.
Okay.
I'm sure that they're used for anybody that does any traveling out in that ocean. I'm sure they use those currents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 256-849-2227, African Americans Ain't African Radio. We're on with Renee Sanders, and we're talking about the transatlantic slave trade. We have a few callers on the line. Did any callers want to add anything or ask any questions?
I got a question, Buck.
Yes, sir.
When I listen to the words transatlantic slave trade, and then I listen to the numbers that they're talking about, how many people were involved in this so-called transatlantic slave trade, I can't help but think, and I've also read material on this, is transatlantic slave trade. Couldn't that be also called a transatlantic slave trade if they were bringing slaves from here to over there into Europe? As a matter of fact, when I read Native Africans and Native Americans by Jack Forbes, it was talking about that the most likely scenario that happened was that so-called native people over here and Africans actually met up in Europe. That's how they came into contact with each other even before they came to the United States. And also, it said he says that the canoes over here in America were of a whole lot better quality than the ones over in coming from Africa. And I was just wondering, transatlantic slave trade, that sounds like more than just slaves coming from Africa to over here.
Well, if you recall, they used to call it the African slave trade. Okay, so now they're not using that terminology anymore. Now, see, the thing is this, is that how many people really picked up on that? They're not calling it the African slave trade anymore because they know that it wasn't just Africans that were being shipped. They know that they were shipping Native Americans, and by huge numbers, not only to the islands, but like you're saying, shipping them back over into England and into Africa, into the slave trade over there. So again, they know that it wasn't just Africans. That's why they changed the name to transatlantic and not just the African slave trade.
Any other questions? Okay, so the people, when the Africans came over here, what what did they start doing? Because down in Africa, they have a whole different way of life. They have a whole different environment. They grow a whole different kind of crop. They're on the other side of the hemisphere, in the southern part of the hemisphere. So when they got here, what did they do?
Very good question. They had to learn our ways, so they had to acclimate. But that's the thing, and that, like you said, most people don't really consider, is that they didn't know how to work this land here, and so that's why people really need to consider that the people that were being used were the indigenous people, because the indigenous people here in the United States, they're the ones that knew how to work the land. They knew what crops to grow, and so I'm sure that in the Africans that did come over here, that did become enslaved, had to learn from the Native American slaves what to grow, how to grow it, where to grow it, how to rotate your crops and all that. They had to learn that from the Native Americans. Who else were they going to learn that from? And again, we have, and if we seriously think about that, that is the only conclusion that you can come up with.
So the people that were coming across the waters, they came over here and just took over.
Oh well, no, no. Now,
well, no, what I mean, let me elaborate on that, because see, this is where we're getting stumped in the mouth today, because we're calling ourselves, the first thing we call ourselves is Africans, and I don't know how you get a continent that's bigger than Africa. This is what I'm saying. We don't think about nothing. They train us much like dogs. Sit, and we sit. So you're telling me that a continent that is bigger than Africa, you have a few Africans come over here, they come over here, and now they're the blueprint of what the people over here is going to be? I'm not feeling that. I'm not feeling it. And what we do, the ignorant ones of us, we empower that thought. We empower it, but we don't question nothing.
Well, and you know what? And I think that has been trickled down through several generations of black people being here in the Americas. Because they were. They learned very well not to question certain things, and so that tradition continues. Not that it is a good one, but again, they were. Like I said before, if you tell somebody long enough something, they'll begin to believe it. They'll begin to do it. So it's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to question. I'm just going to do as I'm told.
I was reading. Frederick Douglass's The Folly of Colonization. And back in the late 1800s, they were talking about shipping people from here over to Africa. And Frederick Douglass made an eloquent point. He was like, you're trying to separate these people from their land and take them to a land where they will have no say-so. They won't have no rights. They'll basically be zombies in that land. And so today I'm hearing that President Obama is setting up something where the so-called African Americans can go back to Africa and do whatever. I'm hearing stories from a whole bunch of Afrocentrics how you can go over to Ghana and get some land, blah 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 blah. What do you think about that?
I said, if that's what they want to do, they can go right ahead. My homeland is here. I'm not going anywhere.
Do you know any people who's went over to Africa and set up there and made that home? And if so, how's it turned out for them over there?
I have heard of some people that I know that have gone over there, and I don't know how well they're doing. But I have heard that that ideology is something that is not new. As a matter of fact, even early on in the early 1800s, that was one of the things that they were considering about, sending all the slaves, because they said, okay, well, you know what, they're able to take care of themselves, so maybe we could just send them onto a land so that they can be by themselves, because they really didn't want it integrated land here. They wanted it all white, but again, that concept of sending back to Africa and going over there is really is. I'm sure that they would have to be pioneers.
Well, you have when they sent a bunch of Negroes over there when they were setting up the country of Liberia. I think that's a fascinating history. Liberia is a fascinating history. The people over in Liberia hated the so-called African Americans that went over there, tried to kill them off and everything. And I'm just wondering, if those are our people, if we came from those people, if those people are the ones who we're connected to, why was there such a big? Why didn't that go smoothly? You had the native Liberians over there was trying to kill every Negro that came over there. Why didn't that work out so well?
Well, I'm sure that even today, if you ask Africans, and they will tell you in a minute that we're not African. I'm talking about the black people over here in the United States. They will say you're not African. See, the black people here in the United States, it seems, are the only people that don't know who they really are. Everybody else in the world knows that these black people over here, that they're not really Africans, especially the Africans. They know that we're not African. And so I'm sure that that's what the problem was even then. It's like, okay, you know what? They're brown-skinned people, but they're not us. So if they're not us, we don't want them here because they're not part of our family. I'm sure that that's what the ideology was.
Yeah, but they sure are fleeing their homes, coming over here, setting up on your stuff, huh? Yeah.
See, they have a lot easier.
I was going to ask, why do they come over here and they treat us like dirt? So it seems to me that they come over here for the same purpose that any other foreigner came over here, is to exploit us and take whatever they can get.
And if we continue to allow it to happen, hey, why should they stop?
I agree with that too. Now.
Hey, if you got a good thing, you don't want to mess it up.
We have a few callers online. Any other callers have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. And actually a comment too. Yeah, good night, Buck, Rick, and Sister Renee. This is Aza.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. Listening to this very interesting conversation, and I had to voice my opinion on this whole African slave trade nonsense. And I just have to say, and I don't care if anybody take it in offense and everything, because this whole African American and black and all this other nonsense and so that the oppressors taught us and so it's really getting under my skin now. I'm tired of hearing it. And I have to say, I'm going to voice my opinion on it, and I'm going to say that the African slave trade is bullshit. And I'm going to say that Roots was a movie based on bullshit. And I'm also going to say that the whole African American Afrocentricity movement is bullshit.
Now, why are you saying it's bullshit, Aza?
Because it has brought confusion, it has misled us from our original American roots. We did that. When they made that movie Roots, they was really talking about us. The Aboriginal American people. That's what they really were talking about. But they switched it around and they said, okay, well, we're not going to let these people and so know that they were already here. So they switched it over to Africa. And they come with this Punta Kinte and all that nonsense. The thing is... Oh, yes?
I apologize. Just very quickly, I just want to let you know that Alex Haley had a chapter or maybe two about his Native American roots, and they made him take that out. So, they made him take it out.
Right. What I want to say is that this whole Afrocentricity and everything, it's just been like, it's been deceitful. So while people are so claiming and so that yes, I'm African American and everything, you've been told a lie. Because like I said before on this show, I already have had people from Africa told me to my face, and they told me I am not African. You cannot be from Africa. And I have already been caught up in this whole nonsense, and so when I was into Rastafari, with all black liberation and all that nonsense, and I was thinking, I'm an African. But these people telling me I'm not an African. My family telling me I'm not from Africa. They say I don't know about Africa. So why are we still clinging on to Africa? If you ain't from Africa, you're from Africa. Now I understand that, everybody and so as in the past and so ancestors and so when the land was much closer, it was one land mass and everything, as Aboriginal people and so, we live amongst each other and everything in that portion. But that portion is already split up. So now this is America, this is Africa, this is Australia, this is Antarctica, and all the other different land masses, right? So that means we have to, we have to represent our territory. And as the Africans do, they represent in Africa. So we have to represent America, or as the natives say, Turtle Island.
So Aza,
see the Africans.
So let me ask you this. So that's a good point. So what do we look like? Like you said, Africans they represent Africa. So what do we look like? We're the indigenous people here, but we represent somewhere else. What does that make us look like?
Like fools.
No matter what comes out of our mouth, no matter how many dashikis we wear, no matter how many kufis we wear, we look like fools.
Yeah, we look like fools. I mean, we already know that some people is definitely, of African seed, and we know that the slave trade, and so it wasn't a lot of Africans they brought over, and that's a bunch of crap. It wasn't millions and so that they brought over and was defecating and pissing on their own selves and all of that, and how were they able to eat and everything. That's a story. That's a myth. So we're already aware of that, but some people, the African Americans, in quotes, will still believe this nonsense, which don't make any sense because they were told that by the white eyes, and so they hung on to this story. But they need to get out of this story about everybody coming from Africa, because everybody didn't come from Africa, because they already don't show that the archaeologists found the bones of Luzia, which we refer as our matriarch. Luzia is the skeletal remains of an Aboriginal American brown-skinned woman. So where she come from? She didn't come from Africa. They found her in Brazil. So how could she be African?
Well, thank you, Aza, for your comments. Do we have any more questions or anything somebody want to add? Renee.
Yes.
What, when you say African slave trade, females, what would be the female part of that? Because normally slavery is about females. Normally slavery is about taking the females, subjugating them, making them the wives of the people who are conquering. In that supposedly so-called African slave trade, what was the status of the females that were bought over, that were supposedly bought over, or were they bought over?
Okay, well, if you go by the numbers of what they have in their books, really only about 14% of that trade would have been females, because it says that 66% were male, and then 22% were children. So only about 14% were females. So again, when these all of these African males were brought over here, who else were they making families with? There were babies that were being made, and so of course they had.
But being that those African babies were being made by indigenous women, and being that the children follow the bloodline of the mother, How are they African?
Well, they're not, and that's what we're saying now, that we're not.
Yes.
Because we are the product of those Native American females, and they try to write that out through laws, and and to make a child with a European Indian ancestry, that they can be an Indian, but the ones who had a so-called Negro ancestry, and get the Indians, because they were called Negroes, who knows by the 1800s, who knows whether that Negro was actually a Native American or an African? They don't know. That's why they just said Negro, and they said so if a Native American and a Negro, now you're saying that they are African in descent. You made a law to say that. So again, they made us African through laws, but the laws that we had, we would become a part of our mother's tribe, and that's so again, and that's what we did. So all of those children that were being born, again, they were definitely Native Americans, but the laws of the United States is what turned them into African slaves.
The laws, are there any particular laws that we can look up that shows where that went down?
Well, there is one law. There's one law. I know it's a law of Virginia that said that if you have 1/4 or more, 1/4 or more Negro blood, then they said 1/4 of color blood, then you will be considered a Negro. However, if you have 1/4 more of Indian blood and you were European, then you would be considered an Indian. Now, that was one of Virginia's laws. It was a law from 1866. I don't exactly remember, but again, there were many laws that really started out in the late 1700s. Some of them in the 1600s that were written. And they started in the late 1600s, where they started saying about children that were born to females are going to follow the line of the female. That was done in the 1600s. So then what happened was this, is that if that Native American female now is a slave, so now all of her descendants now are going to be slaves. It didn't matter whether she was a Native American or not, because they made the law saying that if, that slavery follows the mother.
Yes, ma'am. So in closing, Renee, the trans-African, the transatlantic, the trans-Pacific has caused us, the indigenous people here, nothing but confusion. What
and
are
loss
some
of their identity.
And the loss of their identity? What can we do? What should be done, or in your humble opinion, what should we do to reverse that mind screw that we went through?
Research. You have to have an open mind, and you have to research, listen to people who know what they're saying, and then research what they are saying, so that you will know that the information that you're getting is accurate. You can't be lazy-minded about this, and then we have to continue to let our people know who we are. And it's going to be a slow process. It was a slow process that it took us to get to where we are now. It took almost 50 years for that terminology African American to stick, because it started in the 1960s, and believe me, in the 70s, everyone was not an African American. So again, if we need to research, and then pass the information on.
Well, Renee, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing with us tonight. The information you gave, I'm sure, gave a lot of clarity to some people, and it definitely hit my point. African Americans ain't African. So thank you. So thank you for joining us, and enjoy California. Let me know how that is. Is it warm out there?
Oh, it's beautiful today. It was gorgeous today. I know,
Okay.
and I'm going back on the East Coast on Saturday. I'm gonna miss this.
Okay, we'll have a great time, and we'll talk to you when you get on the East Coast.
Okay, and thanks for having me. And have a great evening.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Now we're gonna have another guest tonight. She's gonna be calling in a minute, and she's gonna talk about the mental health of the so-called African American. This sister's very very up on it. But going back to what Renee was saying, this is what I say causes all the confusion that's going on in our communities with everything we do, from the foods we eat, how we talk to each other, how we think, that we think we come from somewhere else. And I hear what Renee was saying, but from my point of view, it's just not registering to me.
I agree. It don't register with me either.
I don't get it. I mean, the proof of just because they told us, it's like they told you Santa Claus. They told you the story. Let's take the story of Santa Claus. I know people in California today who still put cotton on their roof and on their grass to trick their children that you living in somewhere that you not. And that whole story, when I asked my mama, well, Mama, if Santa Claus is coming down everybody's chimney, how come his clothes are never dirty? These are questions and we just don't think about. And I wonder, are we just that dead? And then you'll have the parents saying, well, I'm just doing it for the kids. But why? So any callers on the line? Did you have any questions or anything you want to bring up about the transatlantic slave trade? Because a lot of us in our culture, we believe we was on that ourselves.
And, you know, a question that I still have about the slave trade is everybody who swear that they came from Africa, they seem to remember being on the boats, and the boats about 3-4 month journey, but you was in Africa for your whole life, and you can't remember what part of Africa you was coming from.
Right.
I mean, that mind boggles me.
Well, why does it mind boggle you, Rick?
Because, I mean, you mean to tell me you can remember a 3 or 4 month trip, but you can't remember where it was the whole, however many years you were living in Africa, you can't remember nothing about that?
Well, I think it's just part of the narrative. I think it's just what they've been told. Remember, this is something you have to remember about the African American, and the African American male really doesn't want to talk about this. I'm taking Dr. Amos Wilson's. The black man is the white man's bottom bitch.
I agree.
Whatever he says, we follow. The Donald Sterling thing with the L.A. Clippers is a perfect example. How come the black man hasn't created a basketball league that can compete with the NBA? We don't even want to talk about that. You're having a draft tonight, and if that's not the closest thing to slavery, I don't know what is. Yeah. These are the kind of things that it's like the sister was saying. We buy into this stuff and we make it happen. We're making it happen. So I don't, I mean, it's only so that victim role we playing is not working. No, it's not working. Rick, go ahead and hold down the conversation for a minute. I'm gonna call the lady that's supposed to be coming on. She's supposed to be in here now. Can you take over for me for a second?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Matter of fact, a couple of things that I want to say. A couple of questions that I had personally about that African slave trade is, I've traveled a lot since I've been on this earth, and I've never been on any particular trip and stood in the same place for more than a couple of hours. And I got to get up and move, and I want to know my question is, how did, if they were all together and they couldn't move, how did they live through that? I mean, you got to move every day. You can't live if you don't move. You will die. And I'm just trying to figure out why these people didn't die.
Right.
And does somebody want to say something, or is that you, Buck?
That's me back.
No.
Yeah, she's about to call in. She's about to call in right now. This sister, she's going to be talking about mental health. So here she is right now. How are you doing today, Mrs. Geyer?
Great.
How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. We just got off of one program, and this is my first time doing this. We're doing a two show program tonight. So we want to welcome you to African Americans Ain't Africa, and we can't wait to hear what you have to share with us on mental health tonight.
All right, fabulous. Sounds good.
So can you give us your background and what you do and all of that?
Yes, absolutely. I am basically a mind-body interventionist. I studied neuroscience, the way the brain works in conjunction with the body, and I help people heal from diseases by using their mind, or help them to basically get their life together when they have problems that are causing them to be disabled mentally or even physically.
Now, what are some of the main problems that you're seeing that's happening to the African American? What are some of the main problems that we're having as a group of people?
Well, I mean, some of the biggest things that I've seen is basically it seems like the African American community is suffering from PTSD. And that seems to be the main problem. Is there's a fight against new information that comes in. You know, when new information is available to us, we're fighting amongst ourselves instead of accepting the information. And when someone fights new information like that, it indicates that there's been trauma, because the way the brain works normally is when information comes, you just let it come towards you, and then the part that's the truth will set in. But when someone has trauma, they're sort of like in defense mechanism, mode, and that's what we see in the African American community today. Is like, don't try to confuse me with the truth.
So you say that's post. What is that? I know it's PSTD, but what is PTSD? Post traumatic slavery disorder.
That's good.
Is that what?
Post-traumatic stress disorder is what it's really called.
Okay.
Well, amongst the medicine community, but I think that's a pretty good way that you described it.
So how is that diagnosed? I mean, because like you said, when we get information, because that's how I always took it. When somebody brings information to me, I'll filter out what I can use and can keep that and throw away the rest. Why is it so hard for us to bring up, to take in new information? I'm talking about the simplest of things.
Right. Well, so post-traumatic stress disorder is an anxiety disorder, and it occurs through going through extreme emotional trauma that involved a threat of injury or death, okay? So now let's go to the black community. I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up with a parent that was under a lot of stress, and even more so came from sort of like a generation of people that, it wasn't that long ago where they were having kids to help them out, right? And then here comes this new generation, and we're like, no, I'm the kid, you're supposed to help me out. So we had this misinformation of the way history kind of was and the way things were supposed to be in our families. So our families are set up in this patriarchal way. Now then we have slavery wasn't that long ago, so we've got parents with low self-esteem and, parents that might have been not treated that well from their parents because of the slave community. Like the slave master, they beat the slave, and then what happens? They go and beat their kids the same way that the slaves got beat, and then sit around and laugh about it, like, I beat my kids, you know what? High five. That's what you got to do, beat a kid's behind. Well, I don't know about you, but when I go to work, my boss doesn't hit me when I make a mistake. So what happens when you use threat to get a positive result? It's called negative conditioning. Now, negative conditioning is the root of all disease. All disease can be traced back to negative conditioning. See, the way you're supposed to train a child is for a reward. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want you to explain that one.
Okay, so, positive conditioning is you go clean your room and I'll give you your allowance. okay? But the way we were taught because of slavery and the negative community that we have here is, go do it or I'll beat you behind. So then what happens is we start to police ourselves when we grow up, and it becomes, go do this or I'll hurt you. And so then we're doing it to ourselves. And so what that does is it creates a trauma situation that continues in our lives. So after being beat on and beat on and beat on by your own, people or family, and then doing it to yourself for so long, you become sort of like, the caged monkey that escaped. And every time somebody tries to bring you something that you think might hurt you, there's a response. No, you don't try to confuse me. Don't try to, change me because I'm happier than I was before. Well, you're happier, but you're not fixed, You're still working off of a shaky ground mentally. And until you clear that negative conditioning and realize that you need to do something for a positive result, you won't be able to live in wellness. So then a person who's living in PTSD, stress disorder, they're speaking death in everything they communicate to other people and to themselves, because A plus B doesn't equal C, it equals D, it equals death.
Yes, right. Our guest is Dante Sears Geyer, and she's talking about how stress and negativity is killing the black community and what we can do about it. Dante, one of the things we talked about earlier, we were talking about why God allows suffering. That's where I am. I'm in the South. I'm in the Southeast, and Christianity is huge down here. The church is big down here, and everybody is, no, not everybody, but the majority of people down here are suffering. Yet they still clamor to this God. Could you speak on that?
Absolutely. I grew up in the church. I was raised Baptist, and then I went non-denominational. And when we were raised in church, we were taught that, God is like this omnipresent being that is sort of watching us to make a mistake, to just, strike us down if we make a mistake. Now, my father died when I was 4 years old, and he died of cancer, and he was a professional baseball player. He was an athlete, and from what I understand, he was getting drafted to play like pro baseball. He ended up dropping dead of cancer, and a kind of cancer that is preventable. So I lived my whole life sort of in this depression, like, why don't I have a dad? And, like, why did God do me like that? Like, here I am, wonderful person with all this to share with the world, and I don't have a daddy. And so it led me to look towards God and ask this question over and over, why do you allow suffering? So now we have people that, religion was supposedly that thing that we had during, the hard years when there was segregation and all that in God. But I truly believe that the Bible we're looking at today reflects the patriarchal society that was inflicted upon everybody when they made this America, or even before that. It says, obey your slave masters, obey wives, obey your husband. Those things could be good for you, but if your husband isn't obeying God, and I'm sorry if you have a slave master, and obey like the law of the land, but then the law of the land isn't helping you. Those words never sunk into my spirit, because I was just like, no.
Yes.
And so I just kept thinking about this, and I kept asking God, and finally one day he just hit me with it. After asking him for 20 years, he said, Dante, I don't allow suffering. You allow suffering. And it really opened my eyes, because then he showed me how we allow suffering in so many ways. The way we walk around and we kill bugs, and we laugh about animals getting killed, And so in this vision he showed me like this refrigerator opening up. And in the refrigerator was just like meat package, right? And I'm like, okay, close the refrigerator, and there's like a family at the table. Then he opens the refrigerator back, and there's human body parts in there. And I'm like, oh my God, how could you do that? And he's like, see how you don't see that my creations are, the same thing? Like, if they were paintings and you went around and destroyed them, and I'm the creator, don't you think I would care? And I never thought about how we don't respect these things that we're given. You see, we create suffering by not caring, by not giving a darn that, how this food got on our table. Or, for instance, our computers are supposedly made with this part that is, that is taken from, like, the African Congo, I believe it is, and the people are impoverished and raped and everything just so we can get this, so that we can afford these computers. When we don't care about how our meat got to the table, then we can't stop suffering. Then we can't stop it for ourselves because we're speaking death. We're saying on one hand, in suffering and in poverty, and on the other hand, we're paying for the poverty and we're begging for it. You know, we say we don't want our children to be poisoned, but then we are playing music in the car that's telling, you know, our children to go put their hands down another girl's pants and another man's pants, and, you know, who cares and what, you know what I mean? It's like we're allowing these things. And it all starts with our mind, and it all starts with that PTSD mindset of, you know, allowing this traumatic thing to happen. It's like we're begging for the slave community to continue in our lives by not being aware.
So basically, you're saying that the language, the word choices, and the images that we use help develops our programming, and we do that ourselves. So we basically program ourselves. Is that what I'm getting?
Yes, it's basically like how the prison system was created. The prison system in the beginning was they had like a guard tower at the top, and the guard tower could see over all the people. And this is how our religious society is built too. So you believe that you're being watched after a while. So since you believe you're being watched, even though that guard can't see everybody at once, since you believe you're being watched, you start to watch yourself. And so what happens is they basically take these images, like a positive image, like, okay, Beyonce, here's a beautiful black woman who's on top of her game and looks good and everything, but then they put impossible situations into it. Okay, here's a beautiful black woman making tons of money, but she's singing about being like, basically kind of like a sexual slave, you know, but saying that's power. And what happens is we get confused. Right and wrong is switched for the person that has PTSD, you know, and so we want more of that. We say, why can't Beyonce, you know, be bending over on stage at the music awards, and how dare you guys get mad? See, they sold us that image, and then we're fighting to keep it. And it's not true. For instance, I used to be a pop singer, and I grew up in the music industry myself, and I thought these songs I was making were going to be heard by adults, okay? So like I'm saying, even these pop singers, when people get mad at them, they don't know. Like I didn't know that when I started having my concerts that they're going to be 15-year-olds looking up. So 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds are looking up to me, but I'm getting money, and I'm talking about how great I am and how sexy I am, and look at me, I got this and I got that. But really, I don't care about them, and I'm really speaking death into their lives because most of those songs are talking about being up in the club and popping bottles and all this stuff. I'm going to tell you right now, I know many celebrities. I've known them since they were teenagers, and they don't go to clubs. They don't pop bottles. They don't do any of those things they're singing about. And when I go to their city and like, hey, what are we going to do tonight? They don't know about what's the club in that city. They don't know what's popping because, see, it's the perpetration of a fraud, of an image that's not true. And as long as we keep facing this mirage, we will never have content. You know, we will never be content in ourselves. We will never have love for ourselves. We will never have anything that can build us out of this pit that we're in.
What about mind control triggers? You know, what are some of those things that trigger us to walk around like robots?
Yeah, so, okay, and this is a really big question you're asking me. Basically, everybody thinks of hypnotists as like these bad people, but basically the most strong device they have in the world for hypnotizing people is a lit box in a dark room, especially if it makes sound and flashing lights. Okay,
so how does that hypnotize one?
Because basically the brain works off the five senses. Now the brain itself, and this is the most important thing, your brain is a processing system. Now, just like if you look at the eye, it looks like the universe. Everything is the same in our world. Your brain works the same as your car does. In your car's brain does. Our body works like a vehicle. You know, we are the brain powering it. So input equals output. Just like if you have a new computer and you get on it and you're searching the web and everything's going good, but you encounter well, now every time you do certain things, it's going to trigger that virus to go deeper into your computer. It's the same thing with mind control. Basically, we've got the mind control device, the TV, and we have the five senses the brain picks up, right? So input. So what are we looking at? Whatever you look at, whatever you smell, whatever you touch, taste. So all five senses are smell, touch, taste, feeling, and hearing, right? So when they have a picture on TV of a burger, for instance, and they're showing this juicy burger, and then you can conjure up the smell of a burger just looking at it. So they got you with the image, then they have you with the smell. So they've already got two of your senses. So you're looking at it, you're smelling it. You could probably taste it in your mouth as you're looking at it, right? And that's going to give you a feeling, right? And then you're hearing it. So once they get all five senses, you're in mind control mode. Because once your brain is handling more than 7 things at one time, everything else that's going in during that confusion is going straight in your brain as programming. So that's what TV does. It bombards your senses and confuses you. It shows you like a positive image with a bunch of negative stuff around it, and it confuses you while you're trying to figure it out. Everything they're saying is going straight in. Control. You know, it's just, and even if you don't like what you're seeing and you're like, ooh, this makes me mad, you give it attention, it still goes in, and in fact, even more.
Area code 256-849-2227, African Americans Ain't African Radio. We're here with Dante Sears Geyer, and we're talking about how stress and negativity is killing the black community. Dante, what happens when a person sleeps with the TV on?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that. My husband had that problem before too. So, you know, you were talking about the TV and I was talking about that. Since you're taking in all those sounds as you're sleeping, you are taking in the sound of trauma. Like, think about how many TV shows. To cause trauma, to cause somebody to go on PTSD, you had to be part of a trauma. Well, now trauma's on TV all day long, right? You're witnessing trauma all day. They show a murder, they show a graphic. You can feel it, taste it, smell it, everything. So all those trauma sequences you're watching and viewing and even listening to while you're sleeping are going straight into your subconscious. So basically, it's programming you to live that trauma lifestyle. To be used to those sounds of screaming and discontent and pain and hurt. You know, we watch a show even with high schoolers, and they immediately jump in bed, and then they have this conflict between us. You know, what TV is teaching us right now is conflict, to be conflicted in our feelings. Conflict is death. It causes cancer. It causes heart problems, you know, everything. So even if you didn't grow up in a PTSD situation, just by watching TV and especially sleeping with it on, you are causing those trauma patterns in your life, especially if you already had trauma in your life. It's like putting a nail in a coffin.
Okay, earlier we talked about relationships, compatibility, and emotional triggers. Could you share to the audience those right there about the relationships and compatibility?
Absolutely. So, you know, as I said, everything. This kind of ties back to God talking about too. I believe that we are all connected and we are all sort of one, but we're also energy. And just like magnets, you know, some energies repel each other and some attract each other. In relationships, one of the first problems we have is, okay, first we find someone we're attracted, we love them, but then those other elements that we have, you know, that are there because we're all made of energy, you know, some parts are going to attract and some parts are going to push away. And then even more so than we have what happened in your childhood. Because most relationships, you are just dealing with the issues of your childhood and the way you were trained to do things in relation to how your partner was. And most, if not all of your fights really have everything to do with how you were raised, that X plus B is supposed to equal D, and he's saying X plus Y equals D, and then you guys are fighting about this thing, and it really comes down to, like the Bible says, principalities. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities and, you know, spiritual something in high places. And basically, it's true. We're fighting against these energies in a relationship, and that's why you have this explosive relationship sometimes where, you know, okay, so if you believe in astrology at all, whether you do or you don't, everybody almost has every sign in them. Like, out of the 12 signs, people have 8. So if, let's say, me and you have plus signs on our personality, but then we have a bunch of negatives in our inner personality, those are the things that we're going to be fighting about all the time. And until you realize what those things are so that you can deal with them on a real level, you won't be able to have a relationship with anybody, much less yourself. So a lot of people, what they should do is look up their natal birth chart. Most astrology sites will give it to you for free. You put in your birth date and your place of birth, and then you can even put in someone you're in a relationship with. There's a great website for that, by the way, cafeastrology.com. And it'll tell you what attracted you, what you guys like about each other, and it'll tell you those secret problems that you're having that you keep coming up against. It'll say, like, there's violence. You can or cannot have a relationship with this person. Because, again, it all goes back to energy and how we can relate to each other. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. What is the name of the website you gave for that? Cafe Astrology?
Cafeastrology.com. With that report from Cafe Astrology, if someone sends me their report with their birth time, I can look at it and I can tell you why you have cancer. I can look at it and I can tell you why you don't have, healthy relationships. I can look at it and tell you what job you should probably have and what natural skills you have. And even the Bible references astrology for those people that are religious. They were following stars to find Jesus. They weren't just following them astronomy-wise. The stars actually would tell the time and place that a person of that kind of behavior would be born. Now, is there or was there a Jesus? I actually believe that there could have been, because everything in those worlds, you see, if you have a lie, it will never equal zero. You know what I mean? Like, you can't say, I got rich from being in jail and other people trying to get in jail, okay? But you could follow the things that Jesus did, and you can heal people if you really understand what you're reading. You could follow astrology, and you can understand people, and you can look at Jesus' supposed birth date and even find his personality type. Because the thing is that we're all made of the star energy, and it's everything. Like, it's just everything. It really is. And when people start to realize that everything is everything, like, it really is. Everything happens for a reason. And those stars, in the position they were in at the moment you were born, made you exactly who you were. You were born to the people you were born to because you were supposed to, and you were put into this situation for a reason. Every person that comes to me that has this really bad negative programming, when we get to the real person inside, they're always gifted, they're always talented, they're always amazing people. They're always gifted, talented, amazing people that are stuck in this trauma pattern. They should not be dying. They should be leaders. And their inside is telling them that you're supposed to be doing something. You're supposed to be somebody. And when the inside life isn't happy with the way you're living on the outside, you're going to have disease. You're going to have violence. You're going to have problems.
I can attest to that. You were talking about the first of all, could you give the listening audience your contact information just in case they want to contact you and get deeper into what you're talking about?
Absolutely, and if anybody wants to send me their birth chart too, I would be happy to review it, especially if they have a health problem. So my website is DanteSears.com, DANTE, Sears like the store.com. That's a good way to reach me. I'm on Facebook as Dante Sears Geyer. I'm on Twitter as Dante Sears, and my company is DSG Intervention.
Earlier we were talking about, or you were just saying right now about genetics, disease is a fallacy. Could you hit on that?
Absolutely. So I want you to think about every time you see the word genetic and replace it with behavior, because you would do much better understanding that everything that is considered genetic is behavior. I think of genes like in the 80s when they used to splash paint on the wall, and like different stuff, and then call that a painting. Your genetics is the behavior you learn. They are the behavior you learn from your family. And a way that you verify, people say like there's a fat gene and there's a gay gene and all that. Is go outside and watch some people that are overweight walk around. Okay, watch an overweight family, for instance, and then watch a skinny family. And what you're going to notice, if you pay attention, is the way they walk. An overweight family, they're all leaned forward. Sometimes the back end cheeks are poked, pushed together. The way they're walking, holding, and standing their body, that's what's causing them to be shaped that way. It has nothing to do with genetics. They all have a skeleton underneath their body. It all has to do with the way you think. If you think you're fat because your mama's fat, then you're probably not going to try. And I apologize if that's the wrong word, but or if you think that you're not smart because your parent is or whatever. So genetics has more to do with behavior, and science has proven this already, because they have shown that through meditation and mindfulness, you can change your genes. So your genes are more like a picture of what is there. It is absolutely changeable. You could be born with the AIDS virus gene and never express AIDS as long as you never have stress. But stress unlocks all genetic patterns. See, you could have the worst childhood, but if you grew up after that and didn't experience any stress, it wouldn't come out. But once that stress moment happened, it would connect to that long chain you had of stress, and then boom, reaction, boom. And if it continued, it would cause a disease. It was like, I can't take this no more, I can't take this more, boom, reaction. So your genetics can be changed by your mind. And if you think about that, like if your computer had a virus, right, and it got sick, you could take that virus out and you would still have brand new, let's say HP laptop again after you got rid of the virus. And it's the same thing with disease. You take out that behavior and the genes will change because the gene is just a map of what's there. They're trying to confuse people. I don't want to say they, but let me say it like this. Everything is a business outside of your house, okay? People need to understand your doctor is a business. Your hospital is a business. They make money. They have private investors. Your job is to make money. It's your job to know your health. It's your job to figure it out. It's not your doctor's job to say, hey, you have diabetes, change your diet. Because they don't have time to show you how to do that and teach you. It's your job to say, if I'm unhealthy and there's other people that are healthy, they must know something I don't know and I need to learn it. And that's how you'll change your genetics. And once you change it for yourself, the behavior you exhibit will change your whole entire family dynamic eventually because you're speaking life instead of death. Instead of saying, I don't want X, Y, and Z, you say, I want to be successful. Instead of saying, I don't want to be broke, you say, I want to be successful. You're changing your genetic pattern already by saying successful. I want success. I want to be healthy. Then your body says, oh, we want health. Now we send out the little crawlers to find health instead of, I don't want to be broke, and all you're thinking about is broke, all you're going to get is broke. If you think I don't want to be sick, all you're going to be is sick, and your genes will reflect that. It's behavior.
So, Dante, basically what you're saying is it's the way we think. So
yes.
But we have to change our thinking.
Yes. You saw that movie with Denzel Washington back in the day called Fallen? It's a very good representation of the way that human beings are communicating right now. They are communicating death through communication. They're passing death and disease through communication. They're saying, oh, you can't do that, or, they're complaining, they're venting to each other, and they're creating. What we speak is what we create. What God is teaching us in the Bible when he said, let there be light, what God is teaching us is we need to speak into existence the things that we want. And that is how we change our health. That's how we change our life.
Area code 256-849-2227. We have a few callers on the line. Does any callers have any questions they may want to ask Mrs. Geyer?
Yes, Dante, I do have a question for you. With all the issues that you named, would it be safe to say that these problems can possibly be caused by some type of neurological damage that we as a people have?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. Basically, so the people who see how they have this positive, environment right now, but some people are rejecting it really hard, and they're like, no, I don't want to see any more affirmations and things. Those people are neurologically damaged by this process. So what they need is someone like me who goes in, because see, these things have to happen subconsciously in your mind. So what we have to do is go in and rewire it, because trauma creates scar tissue in your hippocampus, which is where you store your memories, okay? So when something comes along and it triggers that memory, boom, it triggers that scar tissue, and it triggers that trauma. Boom, you get an instant gut reaction from a person. And that's why some people we can't get through by, you see them go to rehab and jail and everything, and nothing seems to work because they can't be rewired neurologically, and that happens through these kind of conversations, but while they are in a relaxed state. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Dante, earlier you were talking about that conversation we had. You were talking STS type genital shame.
Hey, Brooke, coming in broken, bro. Coming in broken, bro.
Am I coming in now?
Yes, you are.
Dante, you were talking about the STD type, the genital shame, self-worth issues. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Oh, I wish I could hear you. You said have him ask.
You were talking about the STD type, genital shame, and self-worth issues.
I'm sorry. All I heard is issues. It's like issues, time. Say that again slowly, please.
The STD type. The STD type.
STD?
Yeah, the STD type.
Oh, yes. You want to talk about STDs?
The STD type, the genital shame and self-worth issues.
Yes, let me speak on that. As most people know, like Bill Gates did a conference not too long ago talking about how they want to get rid of, people in the population, and they're using, Planned Parenthood and vaccinations and clinics. Well, the reason why, which I found very interesting, we have complete control over this STD thing. STDs, in all regards, come from genital shame. They come from shame. They come from that shame culture that we created with our religion of God looking down on you, ready to strike you. If you grew up believing God's looking over your shoulder while you're doing, something that you also feel is natural for you, it's creating a conflict in you. A person that has AIDS has the most, or HIV, they have like the most shame about sex, and they feel like they deserve nothing. So when you get that self-esteem up, and you realize that these things have been programmed into you, but they're not true. You see, and I'm going to show you the best way to understand it. If you were God, or let's just say you're a father, what parent would want their kid to feel shame? What parent would want their child to be shamed and to the point that they become ill? I would think that any parent would want their children to be happy and to understand that the guidelines I lay out for you are for you to be healthy. And if you just choose not to follow them, I'm sad for you because they help you, but I'm not going to strike you dead for it. But you could strike yourself dead with the guilt, and you can strike yourself ill with that shame that you have. If you're going around having sex and feeling bad about it because maybe your mom or dad told you, about loose women and you're supposed to wait till you're married, but you're here doing it, you got to let go of that shame, and you need to embrace the fact that you're a living human being. And if either you wait to have sex and be abstinent because it's healthy for you, or you have a healthier view of sex because it is all about the way you feel that's causing an STD.
So having sex without a condom isn't a problem. Nice.
Well, let me say this. I think it's a circle thing. Biologically, sure, we can spread the disease, but we all know that they have said before, there's people that will have sex with someone with AIDS and not get AIDS. Not everybody gets them. There's people that have sex with somebody who has herpes and doesn't get herpes. Why? Why? You really have to ask yourself why. And they say, because of a genetic type. Switch that with a behavior type.
Right.
You don't feel bad about it, you don't have a problem. You feel bad about it, you have a problem. And how I became aware of this, I had a neighbor in Hollywood, and he told me, he was gay, and he said, I purposely went out and had sex with people that had AIDS, and he didn't get it. He wanted to, he hoped he would die, but he didn't, because he didn't feel bad about it, is what I learned later in my research. He didn't feel bad about it. Now, I'm not saying go and have sex with people with AIDS. I'm not saying that. I think it's a full circle problem. If you don't love yourself enough to protect yourself in the first place, then it's already a problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't love yourself enough that you're hurting other people going around being promiscuous or hurting yourself, there's a deeper issue that you need to deal with that has to do with your health, and it really isn't the sex. It's that pressure you're putting on yourself instead of realizing everybody doesn't know what to do. Everybody has to start with themselves. Everybody's walking around every day not knowing what to wear, what to do, or how people are thinking about them. But the ones that succeed are the ones that decide, you know what, everybody else is doing it, so I'm going to do it too, and I'm going to go out there with a positive attitude, and I'm going to go claim what's for me, and I'm not going to worry about the problems. And disease won't be able to catch you.
Yes. Third person disassociation, living life disconnected. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the third person disassociation, there's two sides of that. The third person disassociation happens basically to make us act in a traumatic way. See, when somebody has had trauma, what happens is they sort of disconnect from them. So imagine yourself as a bus driver, okay? We're all born with our own bus, our own vehicle that we drive. You're driving along, and then one day something happens that causes you to break down. You broke a wheel or whatever, and you can't fix it yourself, okay? So now you are no longer the driver until you can fix that vehicle. So some other energy comes along or a problem that knocks you off your driver's seat, and now either you get back on the bus and you go, okay, I still am going to figure out how I'm going to go forward, or you get knocked in a third-person disassociation where now you allow something else, some other idea, or some other program to run your life. And most people are running on that program. It's like when you get in an argument with somebody and you are sitting there somehow observing and you know that you should stop, but you keep going and going, and at some point you realize, I'm watching my defense mechanism attack this person, but I can't do anything about it, or you decide not to. So that third person observation post that most people are at, they're allowing things to happen in life because they think they have no effect of it, and all you have to do is grab the wheel. And they say, Jesus, take the wheel. No, you take the wheel. Take the wheel. Don't look for a third person to take your wheel, because if you don't know how to take the wheel, then anybody can drive you. And it's like being on your own bus, and you've got 10 people on the bus taking turns driving the bus. And we see this with celebrities. They have other people driving. Beyonce, she talks about Sasha Fierce. That's her driver. When I was an artist, I was called Princess Dante, and I had a driver. And one day I realized, like Eminem said, they don't want me. They want Shady. I'm chopped liver, And so you realize you're living your life through this other personality. It's not even you. So you've got to associate back into the now and take control of your life.
So, Dante, how can we heal the past and gain mindfulness?
I think one of the main things we need to do is find out who we are. Genetics, genealogy, learning your past, understanding, first of all, who you are, because if we don't know who we are as a people, I think that's a real problem. If you don't know where you came from, how can you know where you're going? So we don't want to be stuck in the past, but we want to be aware of it, because we are living the shame and pain and problems of generations before us. Okay, so moving forward, we need to arm ourselves in a way that we have this information before us. Wait, I'm sorry. Give me the question again. I got lost.
I'm saying, how do we heal the past and gain mindfulness? How do we? It's like there's a bunch of information being put out there, but it seems that a lot of people still aren't getting it.
Right. It's not being explained perfectly. Like Deepak Chopra, he says, practice detachment. Detachment puts you back in the third person again of observing. And I truly believe that we need to be somewhere between there. So how do we heal the past? There's a really great book I read when I was 13 that started me on this path. It was called Take Effective Control of Your Life by Dr. William H. Glasser. In that book, he talks about how every memory that we have creates our behavior. So you need to go back in your past whenever you find a bad behavior and go, where did this behavior come from? Because it's sort of like an imposter in your life. It's a mind virus program that's running. And when you look back and go, okay, so for instance, I had to say, okay, so my dad died when I was 4, and that made it hard for me. They made me think I was a victim. But now that I'm a grown-up, I can look back and realize that it made me exactly who I am. And the minute that I take control in that way and look back at that memory and say, now, looking back at it, I'm not a victim. I'm empowered by this. And in fact, I'm blessed by this, because had I had my dad, maybe I wouldn't be who I was today, right? So now that I have this new way of looking at life, it changes my future. If somebody says like, oh, I'm like this because I got beat when I was a kid, and, I saw some people get killed in front of my face. Well, look at it now from an adult, because all your programming happened between 0 and 7 years old. All psychological programming, all diseases, everything, you pick that up between 0 and 7, okay? So then anything that happens after that time starts the triggers. So what you need to do is remove those triggers. And by figuring out your triggers, like when you get in an argument with somebody and you start going off, realize, what am I going off on this person? Like, what is my real problem? And then when you ask yourself and wait, don't think about it, just wait. Just wait for the answer, because when you trust that voice in your head, we're getting back to instinct. That voice will tell you, boom, it's this memory. Your mama told you were never going to amount to anything. Now, looking as an adult, you realize, you know what, your mom was a hurt person. She didn't mean that. That didn't really mean that you're really nothing, and that because the person who made you said that. Now you could feel like, Mom, you know, I feel bad for my mom. You're healing your whole generational, as they say, generational curse by having that mindset of looking back and saying, this was a decision that was made wrongly, right? You're fixing that foundation that you're standing upon, and that foundation has everything to do with how you're acting in your relationship. It has everything to do with the way you respond. It has to do with if you're a woman and you're looking for older men, or you're a man looking for, you know, women that do a certain thing for you. That mindfulness of paying attention to how we store our information and process it, and thinking about ourselves like a computer. Input equals output. If I'm looking at, you know, as a man or a woman, even I'm looking at porn, and then I'm listening to songs talking about throwing my money in there, I'm probably not going to be good at saving my money, and I'm probably not going to have healthy relationships. So that's mindfulness. It's being aware. Input equals output. You know, algebra was the best thing we could ever learn in school. A plus B equals C. It was teaching us problem solving. And, like, trigonometry is intensive problem solving.
So you're saying that the healing the past and gaining mindfulness, that'll start giving us a winning attitude and put us on an even keel?
Right. We need to start thinking in terms of the basics that we learn in the beginning of our life. You know, your brain powers your body. The way you feel is, and the way you take care of your body is how it's going to be. What you input into your brain is what's going to be the output. We have a lot of misinformation, but whenever you hear information, you need to listen, take it in for a minute, and then allow it to be, and know that it's going to take place inside of your heart if it's supposed to, and if it's not, it's not. Don't try to force false information. And this mindfulness will enable you to not only heal yourself, but your entire family, as you start to really look at messages. Okay, so let me explain it in another way. The way that it works, this mind programming thing, is, say the media, they show you a picture, and then the headline tells you how to feel about it. You need to start looking at things and deciding for yourself how you should really feel about that picture, not how someone else tells you to feel about it. And that is mindfulness, is understanding communication. Because 58% of communication has nothing to do with words, and it has everything to do with body language and action. So what are you doing?
Just like a computer, garbage in, garbage out.
Yes. Yes. You're looking at porn on your computer all day, you're going to have a bunch of viruses. You know, you're over here. It's just like karma. You know, whatever you do is going to come back to you tenfold. It doesn't matter if you terrorize people and they never find you again. The fact that you terrorize people and you consort with people to terrorize, what happens among thieves that we see in movies all the time? They steal from other people, then they steal from each other, kill each other, and then there's one left, and then he gets killed. Evil will always destroy itself. And that's why we need to practice mindfulness. We are destroying ourselves with this evilness and fighting for it, saying, no, I want to listen to Lil Wayne. You know, Lil Wayne is speaking death unto your life. I'm sorry. I think he's a very talented person, but he's death, whether he knows it or not, and a lot of people are.
Area code, yes.
Money.
Go ahead, Dante, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, you know, they're telling you, like, throw your money away, or like, I know this rapper was talking about, as soon as I get my check from Dre, I'm going to go buy a Bentley. You worked your whole life for that $250,000 check, you're going to go buy a Bentley? And then what? And that's what's being perpetuated. Well, I grew up with real rich people, and they don't spend money. They don't spend money. They make stuff that they want. They repaint their old furniture. They have it rehabbed. You know, if you would spend time with real rich people, you would see how much people are speaking death unto us by telling us to keep spending our money to drive a Bentley when you live in an apartment. You know, you need to own land. You need to save your money. You need to learn how to grow your own food so that you can stop putting poison in your body so you can even think rationally. Because if you're eating chemicals all day, your brain isn't even going to work properly. So you can't even understand what I'm saying.
Area code 256-849-2227. We're here with Dante Geyer, and she's given us some nice input on how to kill the stress in the community and the negativity. With the callers on the line, does anybody have any questions or anything they want to add to Mrs. Geyer's statements? Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to state that, Dante, you had talked about people in Hollywood before and the Beyoncés and the alter egos and all these things. I look at that as being what one would deem as a persona. But the sick part about it is that we have personas, people in our community have personas, and they're not in Hollywood. So they don't realize that they're putting on a mask, that they're not being, like you said, who they truly are because they don't know who they are. You did come up with some excellent ideas of how they could shave off that persona. You indicated that you have a website that can assist people. How much more can people do to shed that persona?
Well, I think one of the most important things about shedding the persona is to think about who you were when you were a child. I think that was one of the most eye-opening things for me, to think about who I was when I was a child and what I wanted for myself. You see, I truly believe that as children, when we come out, I believe that babies are some of our smartest people on earth, and children, because they really get it. You might remember being a child and looking at your parents like, why are you making things so hard? And like, why do you guys sit here and scream about stuff? Why don't you just go do A, B, and C? And they'd be like, no, it's not that easy. No, yes, it is that easy. So we need to get back to that childhood mind that we had of understanding that A plus B equals C, you know, that things really are that easy. If you want to, for instance, I want to share this information with people on television. In my community, people are like, you can't do that, you can't do that. Well, if I listen to everybody else, I can't do that, it's impossible. But if I just start talking about what I want to do, it'll come to me. You know, so it's really understanding that it is that easy. You just need to move away from negative people and go towards people that support you, like-minded people. Well, one of the biggest problems with the persona is most people think they're being rejected by others. And the truth is, people are not rejecting you. You are rejecting people. That is a huge thing that, you know, somebody's like, oh, I'm by myself, nobody loves me. No, you need to really realize you don't like people. Maybe you have different interests than most people. And when you start to pay attention and stop trying to fit in, you start to realize that actually I'm a different kind of person. And that is a person's strength. That is speaking life into yourself, connecting to who you really are. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, very much so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sometimes I go right off the top. Right?
Oh, yes.
So.
Okay. Does any?
I'd like to ask a question or make a comment. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You know, I've been listening to everything that you say, and I agree totally with what you're saying about how the mind can heal and all that type of stuff. But it keeps, you know, every time I think about, you know, everything that's going on and see how the good you were saying, it still gets to me that these things that you're talking about, they work great for individuals, but it seems like our problem is as a collective. And I was wanting to know is do you have like group sessions or something like that? Because I think the only way that our people's problems are going to be solved is as a collective.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I believe that as well, and I try to and preach amongst the collective. And I'll just use the example of Jesus for a second. Jesus left his family to go preach amongst the people, and he didn't go and indoctrinate his people. He was showing us that you need to go out and find like-minded people, because especially black people, the way that we tend to work is that we don't want to listen to anybody unless they have something more than we have, and you know, there's just a lot of negativity people are going to have. And when you sit there and try to fight everybody that's negative towards your vision, you're really not going to get anywhere. But when you seek out like-minded people that are trying to change, you have a much higher chance. And so, yes, I do work with groups, but again, people that are like-minded that want to change. I used to try to change people that didn't want to change, and they almost had me quit. I mean, I wanted to die trying to preach to those people and help them because they were just like, you ain't doing nothing, and you talking nonsense, and it was overwhelming. And I was saddened by that, and then I realized, you know what, they need to be a fan first. They need me to collect all the people who do want to do something about it, see the movement, and then they'll want to join, because some people are just followers. It's not their fault. They just don't know how to be a leader, and they're afraid to stand up, so they need to follow a big thing. So the best thing you can do is surround yourself with people that are trying to do it instead of trying to change the mind of people that don't want to hear it. Because just like we're watching TV, and people think they want to do the right thing, and it's influencing them to do the bad thing, by you doing the right thing, you influence people that there is a right thing, because when they go into their mind treasure chest of things to do, now you stick out as an example to them of something else. You see, whenever someone's going for a behavior, anything that happens, when you go for that response, you look inside yourself and go, now, how can I handle this now? Either your mom or dad or somebody you saw, and that's the reaction you give, is what worked in the past, either that you did or that you saw. So, people need to see something positive, and then eventually, after a while, they'll start going for those positive behaviors that you're exhibiting. If you go amongst the negative people, they're just going to drag you down, and I believe you will probably not be as happy about it.
So, Mrs. Geyer, in closing, can you give us some of your metaphors for success?
Absolutely. Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So metaphor success is the most important thing. I dropped out of school when I was 15 and became a millionaire when I was 25. And I did it by using metaphors. And what it was is it goes back to our childhood again. Like, think about Wile E. Coyote, okay? He would run off that cliff chasing after the Roadrunner. The Roadrunner was his goal, right? And as he was running off that cliff, he would keep going, even after the cliff wasn't there. It wasn't until he looked down that he will fall. Now, they were trying to subconsciously teach us something there, and that is that if you want something, you need to keep going forward with it, and don't look down at the problems, right? As long as he didn't see the problem that, oh, there's no road underneath me, he was gone. I would be like, go, 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 like, don't look down. He would look down, boom.
Right.
Right, so what they were teaching us is it's a metaphor. This is how people become rich. That fake it till you make it is fake it till you become it. Think about George in the jungle. He would swing from those ropes, swing from a rope, and if there wasn't a rope, he would swing back and swing for another direction. He would go, oh, hell, let go of it, fall on the floor and cry his eyes out and be like, damn, I guess I can't find another rope. He would keep going until he found another rope. So the metaphor is that you want to keep your eyes on the vision. Obstacles are what we see when we take our eyes off our goals. Problems are what we see when we take our eyes off our goals. When we focus on fixing things and the solution, then we can just always continue to move forward, and problems will work themselves out, because every problem is an opportunity. Every opportunity comes wrapped in as a problem. So if you start thinking of problems like, oh, yeah, problem, oh, hey, I can't wait to solve this problem, because when I do, it won't be a problem anymore, and I can probably make money off of it, man, you will be rich, and you will be well off. So get excited about problems because of the solution, and think about yourself like George in the jungle. You're swinging from rope to rope, like Tarzan, there we go, from rope to rope. Oh, there's no rope here, oh, swing back and grab another rope. Or you're Wile E. Coyote, and you're running straight off that cliff. Don't look down. Just keep looking straight up at the horizon at your goal. Because the point between A and B is a straight line. Look at that straight line.
We're having Miss Dante Sears Geyer on the phone with us, and she is dropping some metaphors and some wisdom that I'm sure that we all can use. Mrs. Geyer, in closing, what would you like to leave the African Americans Ain't African audience?
In closing, I would like to say that as a black person, as they call us in America, we have been told that we are defeated persons, that we are defeated people. We have been fed this image, this lie. When I look at my family, though, I find that we are some of the most psychic, intelligent, amazing, emotionally connected people ever. And that leads me to believe that the black person is persecuted because, not because they are not worthy, because we are worthy, because we are talented, because we are powerful. We have a spiritual ability that surpasses many cultures. And we need to cling to that strength of spirit. And we need to think about ourselves not only as a child of God, but also as the living piece of God. Because if energy can't be created nor destroyed, that means that we're all God and we're all ourselves. And since we are God and we are His creation, then we can do anything that we put our minds to, and we need to do that.
Well, Ms. Geyer, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. This has been very, very enlightening for me, and I'm sure the audience too. Thank you so much. And please, please tell me you'll come back again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mrs. Geyer, and thank you for joining us tonight.
All right, thank
We
you.
enjoyed it.
Okay. Okay. So to the listening audience, I hope you guys enjoyed Mrs. Geyer. Very intelligent sister. She called me a few days ago and inquiring about the show, and I told her she had to come on. And these are the kind of things, and I thought what she had to offer would help us see things a little clearer and help clear up a lot of the negativity that's going on in our community. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. For Rick Moon, I'm Buck Wylam. You have listened to another episode of African Americans Ain't Africans. Please join us next week, and we're going to keep these type shows coming. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Good night.